right, thank you all for coming here. My name is Tomasz Pruski. As you have heard in the introduction, I'm a senior level designer at Techland. I work in the Warsaw office. And this is my talk. I used to be a narrative designer like you, the technical difficulties of video game storytelling. I want to say a bit about me because I'm a level designer, but I'm telling you about narrative design. So before I actually got into the industry, I was gathering experience at various game jams, like LOG, Global Game Jam. And then with this experience, I got a job at CI Games where I performed multiple roles, including that of lead narrative designer for a period of time. Then I moved on to 11-bit studios, and now I'm at Techland. So what's this talk about? Why is a level designer telling me about narrative design? It's going to be two parts to this talk. The first one is less about what makes a story good. It's going to be this this less technical, more storytelling approach. Disclaimer, I am not an expert in storytelling. That's why, like for example, I invite you to tomorrow's talk by Artur Gęszyniec. But today, I'm going to be telling you about what needs to happen between writing a story and actually playing it in a video game. As a level designer, I'm the guy that's going to be ticking the boxes in the editor. I'm the guy that plugs in the dialogue. I'm the guy that works with the log kit. But I have several other things to think about when making a level. So you, as the narrative designer, have to own the narrative design. So I want you to be better informed about what happens in video game development from the perspective of a level designer, so you can own this and be prepared to create this narrative in a game. So the first part, the more storytelling approach. I have a few high-level guidelines. As I said, I'm not an expert, but these are the ones that I have noticed while working on games as a level designer. Keep your narrative solutions consistent with the world you're trying to create. Actually, for this one, I have an example. A comic by Penny Arcade, where the Vault Dweller is sneaking past super mutants, but he has a hidden superpower. You have a radio playing in the game, and it's blasting constantly. It's not alerting AI. Nobody reacts to it. But it's there. It's in the game world. It reacts to the audio volumes, but AI just doesn't notice it. So, a good idea would be to either have them notice it, but then it would be too hard for people who actually want to listen to the radio and don't want to act as as a sound stimulus for the AI. So maybe, I don't know, make a quest out of it, make a biometric interface where the radio is actually streamed directly to your ear. But in the game, the radio blasts the music out to the level and nobody notices it. So, keep it consistent. Second one, if it's not in the game, it's not in the game. By that I mean, people are not going to go out there and read your notes about a character. What you want to convey to the players about the story, about the characters that are in the game, you have to give it to them in a easily digestible manner. They have to see what you want them to see and hear what you want them to hear. If you have a background on a character that only you know about, it's cool to use it for marketing purposes, put a poster, tweet it, or put it on Instagram. But if it's not in the game, as the players are playing it, they're not going to be experiencing it. So, if you want it to be there, put it in there. Keep the players and their characters' knowledge aligned. By that, I mean you as the player, you, like me as Tomasz, while I'm playing the game. For example, I'm playing Tomb Raider, and I'm playing as Lara. And me, as Tomasz, I have read the audio logs, the diaries that I collect around the level, and I already know who the villain is. But for some reason, Lara doesn't. And it's been hours since I've, seen the guy, but, the character in the game is super surprised. So, keep the knowledge aligned. And next one is don't reference optional content in the main story unless players have completed it or will definitely encounter it. Witcher does that well. So if you have a big story arc that takes place outside of the main story arc, don't use references in the main story to things that players haven't seen. Like, if you're sure that they have seen it, sure, put it in there. Like, you have variables that change. The game knows if you've completed some quests, and then you can reference it. If you haven't, you should probably keep it out of the main story. Be aware of the technical limitations of your game. Narrative solutions cost. And I'm not even talking about money. They cost memory, they cost, you have to stream it, you have to keep it in memory, you have to keep the animations, the sounds, everything has to be somewhere. It's not, streamed from the cloud. So if you have a lot of audio, a lot of dialogue in the game, a lot of cutscenes, video, you got to know if you're going to fit it in. And I know that a lot of games actually put it towards the end of production, but it's good to start early on, not to end up with like 3 different scripts, because you wrote one script and recorded it, but it turns out that it's just too much, and the game can't, handle it. Don't make your players feel stupid. Sounds obvious, but I mean a very specific thing. Why I have Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd. A long time ago, Looney Tunes had an episode where Bugs Bunny called Elmer Fudd Nimrod. And you might have heard the word Nimrod in English. It defines a person that's, well, a stupid person. It's they see the image of Elmer Fudd and they see a stupid person and they think Nimrod, okay, is that like is that a synonym? No, that's Nimrod. Bugs Bunny was actually trying to, referencing the Old Testament great hunter Nimrod, but people didn't know who that was. And it often happens that when you're researching the theme of your game, the location that your game takes place in, you come across something that's interesting. It fits perfectly. Like, you have a god which fits the theme, which fits the setting, and like in this place, Nimrod was a hunter, and Elmer Fudd is a hunter. But you didn't tell people who Nimrod was. They don't get the reference, and they just end up feeling stupid. And that's not what you want to do. Okay, the next chapter is every decision you make affects the scope. That's a production topic, if anything else. From the very top high-level decisions that you make about the game, the scope, meaning basically, bottom line, the amount of money and time that you're going to have to spend is going to be defined by those decisions. So what camera is your game? Third person, first person. If you have a first-person camera, maybe you don't have to create the head for your main character, because that's expensive. It takes time, it takes money. But then again, maybe he approaches a mirror, or you see him in a cutscene. The cutscene is third person. So those decisions are going to affect everything. Do you have cutscenes? That's very basic. Are those cutscenes made in engine? Are they pre-rendered? Do you just pay a company $1 million and they give you a ready video, you stream it in the game, done? Or do you actually have to hook up the animations to the characters, make sure that they're wearing the equipment that you have in the game? It's buggy. I mean, it can be. It's just really difficult to make. But, it's one of the options. How many characters are there? Every head, every face, every limb costs a lot of time and or money to make, to animate. Every character has to be, well, it doesn't have to be voiced, but in AAA productions, many of the characters are voiced. Are they voiced? Are all the lines voiced? So you can go either full, for example, with Bethesda games, the Elder Scrolls series. Oblivion divided this into two categories, dialogues that were fully voiced and dialogues that were, you had a voice for the first sentence, generic sentence, like a greeting, hello, but the rest of it was just text. In Skyrim, it's all voiced, so you can imagine the budget for the voices had to be many times bigger. Be careful what you write. Everything has a consequence to the scope, the time limitations. You know, your producers are setting deadlines, timetables, you're trying to adhere to them. If in the middle of a sprint it turns out it's not doable, you've lost all that time, all that money. If you have a cutscene, you're writing a script, you have a cutscene where you want a character to fiddle a pen. You know, he's sitting, you have a close-up of his hand. Imagine you're making a movie. That's the easiest thing in the world. You just have to have an actor that can actually fiddle a pen. That's it. You got to have a pen, an actor, and a camera. And, you know, give him a pen and say, fiddle. In a game, you got to have, you know, it's a close-up scene. So the textures on the hand have to be high resolution. The pen has to be animated. The fingers have to be animated. There's just so many things that you need to take into consideration. Next, I want to talk about AI barks. And actually, before I even start, in the previous talk, Quasi mentioned the difference between barks and chatter. So internally in teams, different things are named differently. Barks can be things that are shouted at you by AI during combat or between themselves. So make sure that you know what you're talking about internally. The first thing, don't make them too memorable. And I also want to use an example later on from Skyrim. But what I mean by that is you don't want to have players remembering this one line. It's generic. It's not there to take away your attention. If you're fighting, if it's combat, you need to focus on the gameplay. They need to convey very specific information. You don't have time to be distracted by jokes or personal stories. Although I did hear one counter argument to this point where if you don't have a lot of space for character development in your game, you can use that, make some memorable barks, like in Warcraft, where all the character development you had for characters was this small avatar. So they added memorable lines just to, tell you more about those characters. Avoid repetition, write a lot of them. In combat, if you have a shooter game, if you have an RPG, action RPG, there's a lot of combat. You are playing as the character throughout the entire game, so you're going to be hearing him or her a lot too. And if you hear those two lines over and over, it's going to be old pretty quickly. This is probably the most important thing in this talk. Talk to your AI designers and programmers. These people, like I said in the beginning, we're the level designers, the programmers. We don't own the narrative. You as the narrative designer should own the narrative. And so you got to talk to your people, know how these barks are played. You got to know which impulses, which technical impulses can trigger those barks. For example, you want to have an AI reacting to your footsteps, to your sounds, but it turns out that your game, your engine, doesn't support audio stimuli. You only have visual stimuli or just generic AI signal. And then you can't tell the difference between a visual and audio input, and so your AI starts, saying gibberish. Read your barks and check for gameplay consequences. I actually want to play a clip for you for this one. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on, so I hope It's not too much, but pay attention to the subtitles in the bottom of the screen. I'm going to try and put it on better. Okay, it's pretty loud too. We can turn it down a bit. Okay, I don't know if you actually heard a lot of this. It was in Russian anyway. But actually, this is one thing great about this game too that I'm going to talk about in a second. So Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, for me, is an example of how to do AI barks really well. They mean everything that they say. Basically, everything that the AI tells you has gameplay consequences. They're not just talking bullshit. They tell you if they know where you are, which is an important information for the player. They tell you if they're sending in reinforcements. And they even do a thing where they're calling in reinforcements, but the AI pool is drained because there's so many AIs spawned on the level. So the base actually just tells them, you know, we can't divert any additional units, you're going to have to wait, and then when it frees up, they come in. So, you know, if you have a certain list of barks that you need to do, make sure that the consequences that come from them can be achieved. Like, you have a bark that says enemy contact, and you want to write a line which says there's somebody shooting at us, what do we do? And then you write a line which says send backup. The players are going to expect backup. So that's something to look out for. Okay, I got to click it through. That's pretty difficult. Okay, there we go. And the last point, play your game regularly. Like I said, the AI inputs, they're rarely super specific. Like the AI saw you after having lost you. That's not the way it's named in the engine. And programmers change the AI, designers change the AI. You need to be on their ass and make sure that the AI is still valid. You need to make sure that the inputs, the ways that you handle this input, didn't change the barks. And if it did, then you need to write new barks or implement them in a different way. And now NPC Dialogues, which is kind of similar. I mean, you're going to be hearing them a lot in games, especially like RPG games, open world games. You need to write a lot of them. If you have like a 20-hour game, a 30-hour game, you need to write a ton of barks. And for that, I also have a clip. And even if you don't, like, I can skip it. You know what this guy's going to say. Okay, I'm not hearing it. Maybe it's just one channel or something. But you know what he said. That's the point. That's the most notorious bark in video game history. That's half of my talk title. The guard says, I used to be an adventurer like you, then I took an arrow in the knee. It's super memorable. It was played constantly. Like, it's not even super memorable on its own, but the fact that it played every time that you visited this location in Whiterun, and basically every time that you passed by this dude, it just became a meme. And you might say, hey, that's a good thing. You know, people are talking about your game, they're making memes. But to me, the ultimate confirmation that it's not a great idea is the fact that I've recently been playing the Switch version of Skyrim, and it's not there. they cut it. They edited it out. So if Bethesda doesn't think it's a good thing, I don't think it's a good thing. Okay. So yeah, write a lot of them. Don't play them all the time. Make sure the sex and age of the model playing the dialogue is the same as the voice. This is pretty low level. You need to know how the dialogues are going to be played to avoid situations where, for example, you have an old fella sitting on a bench in a village speaking in a young girl's voice. That's just weird. So you need to know how the dialogues are played, how you're going to cue them. And you have several options. You can base that on the proximity to the player. Is he, like, you define a certain radius. Am I in the radius? Let's play the dialogue. Am I playing a dialogue which is relevant to something that I'm doing? Maybe when I reach a table with some tools or cooking supplies, maybe I'm going to talk about that. Maybe I'm just standing in place smoking a cigarette all day, which is like half the AI do, and I just play a random bark every 30 seconds. So you need to know how that is played, and open world games have notoriously failed at that during fast travel. When you fast travel, you usually spawn in a very populated location, like say a city center, and suddenly it turns out that you fulfill the quota to play like 10 dialogues around you. You have 10 different AIs, they all want to say something, and they all do. And you're just attacked by this medley of different voices, and you can't pick up anything, and you know, it's something to avoid. Yeah. So you might think about a queue system and volume priorities, not just for many people talking at you at one time. This is also very important for distinguishing between something that is important and something that is not. Like, for example, you have a main character from the main storyline escorting you. You're walking through the city. You're on a quest, and he's telling you something important to the quest. But you're walking through a marketplace, and again, you have 10 different AI that want to say something to you. They want to sell you their fruit. They want to shout obscenities at you. And if it's not queued up, if it's not prioritized, you're going to lose what the main character wanted to say to you. And the last thing is, remember about naming conventions. Now, everybody has their own internal workflow. Every company is different. Just remember about this. Don't name your dialogues two guys talking about beer, or you know, enemies talking about nuclear winter. So make it as generic as possible. You're going to find it in the logkit. Don't worry. Just stick to naming conventions. And subtitles, it's like a subsystem of the same thing. You need to take it very early on into considerations. Are all the lines subtitled? Do you only use subtitles for the main lines? Are the characters speaking in a different language? If they are, should we subtitle it to our language, or is this something that we want? Like, is this just flavor, and we don't need the players to understand what they're saying? These are all the decisions. And again, as with volume and with barks, you need to prioritize those systems, those subtitles. Again, you're walking with the main character through the marketplace. He's giving you all the details. He's giving you all the exposition, all the layout on your next quest. But then his line disappears, and the next one says, hey, you want to buy some fish? And you're lost. You don't know if the guy that you're walking with is talking about fish or what's happening. Queue systems, that's the same thing. Maybe you play the subtitles after the ones that you were playing have finished. This point, divide long lines into several lines. This should be done while you're writing and not while you're implementing. This is super important. For various reasons. You don't want to spoil anything for the players. Like, you have Darth Vader telling Luke that he's his father. Spoiler alert, you've all seen the movie. And it's at the end of a long line, and the players have already read it, but Darth hasn't said it, and all your build-up is ruined because, well, they know what's going to happen, even though it's 3 seconds early. Same with punchlines and jokes. You don't want to spoil the punchline by showing it too early. Blocks of text, you have limited screen space. You don't want to, you have UI at the bottom of your screen. You don't want to overlap that. You don't have unlimited space for subtitles. So if you divide them up, you don't have to display it for like half a screen. Maybe if it's too long, you can roll it, but then it's a new mechanic, it's a new system that your programmers have to do for you. And after the recording, the actual live recording with the voice actors, make sure that, because when they're recording, sometimes it turns out that the line is just easier to say or more natural in a way that is just slightly different from the written one. And so after you've done implementing them, it's good to hear them and actually check if they're the same as the spoken text. So the last big chapter that I want to do with you is live recording. This is a topic for a long talk in itself. I'm just going to go over the high-level guidelines. The first one, this is super important. This is the most important thing with live recording. You need text and context. You can say the word yes in like 20 different ways. Is it sarcastic? Is it a question? Is it just annoying? An annoyed just interjection? Is it confirmation? Is it just generic? I don't know, and the actor doesn't know either. He's not the one that wrote the script. You need to tell him how he's supposed to say it, because sometimes he doesn't even see the rest of the script. He just sees his lines or her, because it's just easier to record that way. They can access them, but it's time-consuming, and you've paid for the studio, and you don't want to get out of the flow. You need to know what you're saying. Plan realistically. As with everything that has the human context, mistakes happen, stuff happens, people get tired, people have better days, people have worse days. If you bank on recording everything, like you got a limited budget, but you want Troy Baker. Like, I can afford 2 days with Troy Baker, and I only got like 7 hours, 8 hours, but Troy Baker's my guy. But I have 3 hours of text to record. That's just not going to happen. You're not going to record that much in 2 days. How many actors will you need? Can somebody record lines for a different character? Like, can a main character, although it's expensive, so probably that's not a great idea, to have a main character voice like some additional characters, like a villager or an AI enemy? How many sessions per actor? That's all the budgeting. You need to know for how long you're going to have them. And another important thing is, are they local? Can you re-record with them? Can you recall them? Can you tell them, hey Troy, I need you for another hour. We just got a couple lines that got changed. You need to come down to the studio and record them. But you're recording in Krakow or Warsaw, and Troy Baker is somewhere in LA or somewhere, so you got to fly him in. He's got his own timetables. Maybe you have an actor that doesn't have a visa. It happens. So, think about if the actors can be sourced locally. If they can, great. If you really want Troy, give him a call. He's a great actor. Are they reliable? Different actors, well, they're celebrities often. They're creative people. They have, some of them are better, some of them are worse, actually with every profession. So if somebody is known to take longer, you need to plan longer sessions. Are they going to be speaking in their native language? That's pretty important. Everybody can tell. Like, if you're not a native speaker, if you're not recording in your native language, people are going to tell. And they might have trouble reading the lines. Like say you have a person who is not very good at English, but you give them an English script to read, and they're going to take longer. They're going to try, you're going to do different takes, and it's going to take a lot longer. And if they're stylized, like you're voicing a monster, like, I don't know, Gollum, you're voicing Gollum, the voice breaks down. If you scheduled 5-6 hour sessions, at the 6th hour, Gollum's voice is going to be a lot different than at the first line that you recorded. What you can do is play early lines every so often, like every 10 lines, you're going to play the previous one so the actor can hear what his voice was. So to conclude, to just give you a couple of handy tools, Total Commander, that's the best thing, not only for narrative designers, game designers, level designers, everybody. And I don't mean that you're searching for a file. You are searching inside the file. 90% of the files in your game are text files, and you can search through them. Your editor will often not have a search function which tells you, hey, you're using this particular dialogue in those 4 places. Your editor doesn't have to have this feature. Total Commander does, because you just put the name of the dialogue in the search bar, press enter, and it gives you all the files that contain this text. So do it. Be careful when stitching things together. Something might, you forgot to record something, or once you did, it doesn't sound great, and you don't want to recall the actor for just one line. So you want to stitch it together. You want to take different parts, different snippets of other stuff that he said, stitch it together. It might work, it might just work, but then again, it has to work in all the languages. If your game is localized into English, Spanish, German, whatever, you need to stitch it together in all these languages, and sentences have different structure in different languages. It's hard. So, this is like a super last resort. Don't wait for somebody's solutions. What I really mean is be assertive. You don't have a tool, ask for it. You don't have a subtitle system, make the programmers, the tools programmers make it for you. You don't have a search function, have them make it for you. Obviously, they're not going to, do everything. Maybe they will. Maybe they're awesome programmers. But sometimes, if you're not going to push for the technology that you need, you're either going to end up using technology that somebody else did or not using it at all. So have people write tools for you. And the last thing, play your game. Obviously, you have to play your game all the time. As a narrative designer, you have to play it constantly. This is, you and QA have to play this game more than anybody else to know how the narrative is actually sold. So play your game. Play your game all the time. All right, thank you for listening. We're probably going to have a few moments for Q&A. Also, if you want to talk to me, just catch me whenever or at these addresses. If you can rate the talk on the app, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have, if we have any questions, just raise your hand.
There's one.
Yes, so I have a question regarding barks, or more importantly, writing them. The main writer of Spec Ops: The Line actually in an interview said that he writes like 5 barks for the game that are very generic, very forgettable, very like no one will notice them, and 1 for himself that is like completely out of left field. So, and most of them get in the game. Most people don't notice them, but some of them have an impact. So what do you think about that? So that most of them are very, very forgettable, but somewhere in there you put something that someone remembers.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm going to use an example that's not related to barks, but it's also something that happens a lot in games, namely reload animations. Battlefield, I think it was Hardline, one of those, did a super low chance of playing a super funny, super well-made custom animation of reloading. For example, you're ejecting a spent magazine and a third arm appears around the screen and gives you a new one, and you just take it and put it in the clip. The same can be done in barks. You can have your super funny, super witty, super well-written bark. Just, give it a lower chance of playing, maybe. So it's not like playing every fifth or fourth time. We have one more over there.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question. What do you think about this type of displaying dialogues? You have a text, but you have some kind of generic word that character tell from the beginning of the line, and then the dialogues goes on. What type of the words use, and is this a good way to implement dialogue system in the small indie budget, for example, when you don't have so much money?
What do you mean, like every dialogue in the game like that, or like just the less important ones, or just all of them? Do you want like all of them to be played like a small generic voiceover and then text, or just some of them?
Yeah, so like I was wondering, is you can, with a small budget, without voiceover, make some kind of small amount of voice from the beginning, for example?
I think so. For example, a lot of Japanese RPGs do that, actually. They have identified the key emotions that the character speaking is trying to convey. So like you're playing, I don't know, Ace Attorney, or whichever 2D Japanese RPG game has character avatars appearing on a screen. And they're shocked, they're happy, they're apprehensible. Whatever emotion that they're trying to convey can have a small voice line hooked up to it. So, you're writing your text underneath in the box, but the character says a short sentence or just 1-2 words that conveys the emotion that they're trying to sell. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yep.
Right?
So, is there any specific words to use for this kind of voice?
Like I said in the beginning, I'm not a writer. I'm not the guy you should be asking. I'm just telling you, as a level designer, we can have the tools to make it happen, but you got to write those words.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Okay, anybody else? I think we have time for 1 or 2 more. In the front.
Does it come often that working with a narrative designer influences how you construct levels, and if so, how does it happen?
Well, you have different companies, different workflows, different priorities in your game. If you have a completely fast-paced action shooter, the dialogues are not super important, so you're not going to pay a lot of attention to the way that they're written or implemented. But, the more narrative-driven the game is, the more focus you're going to have to put on it. So obviously narrative designers will have a lot of say in, if this stretch of the level is enough to finish this cutscene. Like, we're riding horses in Red Dead Redemption, we're talking. Is the road from point A to point B long enough for me to finish my dialogue? If it's not, maybe we can shorten the dialogue, maybe we can make the road longer. You know, it's a back and forth. You got to talk to your people. It's a collaboration, you know, you're not making the game yourself. Neither are level designers or producers. Everybody's in it together. Cool. Maybe one more, or we're going to the gala. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.